Racist flight attendant harasses, Muslim man freezes when he reveals he's a judge. Welcome to this gripping tale filled with intrigue, tension, and shocking revelations. Prepare to embark on a journey aboard a high-stakes flight that takes an unexpected turn when one individual's prejudice collides with the unwavering dignity of another. At first glance, our story appears to be about routine airline protocols and the everyday stresses of travel, but beneath the surface, dark currents of bias bubble to the forefront. In this narrative, a single moment of cruelty unravels into a dramatic standoff. Friendships are tested, destinies collide, and secrets come to light in the most surprising ways. Stay tuned for a riveting chronicle of courage, confrontation, and karmic justice. Before we dive in, if you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. If you're excited about this story, let us know. If you enjoyed the video, press 1. If not, press O. Your feedback really inspires me to gather more uplifting and meaningful stories. The thunder of jets rumbled ominously through the crisp morning air at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Passengers bustled around Gate 47, each clutching boarding passes and personal belongings with an anxious shuffle. Among them was Yasir Azizi, an accomplished man of calm bearing who politely removed his shoes at security without complaint. The bright red Delta signage hovered above like a symbolic sentinel, promising safe passage and a dependable flight. No one knew that this ordinary scene would soon erupt into chaos. An unassuming hush lingered, foreshadowing a confrontation that would shake every passenger to their core before the wheels touched down. Whispers fluttered among the travelers standing in line. First-class patrons, business-class flyers, and economy passengers all murmured about potential delays. A figure emerged from the corner, a flight attendant named Diane, who was known for her curt efficiency but harbored a darker side. She scanned the crowd with a hawk-like gaze, fixating on certain travelers with suspicion. Yasir, neatly dressed in a tailored blazer, carried an air of quiet confidence that clashed with Diane's preconceived notions. He was on his way to a legal conference, but she didn't know that. Tension crackled in the air as her focus landed squarely on him. In an effort to occupy his time before boarding, Yasir observed the small dramas unfolding around him. A nervous grandmother rummaged through her handbag for a lost passport. A fretful mother juggled a fussy toddler, and an eager tourist group snapped photos of the Boeing 777 waiting outside. Yet it was Diane's voice, sharp and impatient, that cut through the background noise. She loudly warned passengers to line up correctly and have IDs ready. Her eyes drifted back to Yasir more than once, narrowing in a way that suggested an unwarranted suspicion. He remained composed, exuding a measured politeness that belied the storm on the horizon. The boarding call commenced, dividing passengers into zones. Yasir, who held a business-class seat, stepped forward when his group number was announced. However, Diane sidled up behind the desk, scanning his ticket with an unmistakable grimace. She paused, flipping the corner of his boarding pass as though expecting it to be fraudulent. Another attendant nearby seemed embarrassed by her behavior, but remained silent. Yasir politely requested confirmation of his seat, speaking with perfect diction. Diane grumbled something under her breath, then handed back the ticket. He sensed a subtle hostility, yet hoped this would be the end of it. Little did he know, the worst was yet to come. The cabin interior was a bustle of overhead bins, opening and slamming shut, seatbelts clicking, and muffled greetings. Passengers were settling in, stashing laptop bags, adjusting seatbelts, and scoping out the in-flight entertainment. Yasir took his seat, a window spot with ample legroom. He breathed a small sigh of relief, thinking the flight would be uneventful despite the attendant's odd attitude. Moments later, he noticed Diane marching down the aisle, Though her lips curled in a perfunctory smile for some, it faded instantly when she reached Yassir's row. She asked to see his ticket once again, voice clipped and icy. Caught off guard, Yassir complied with calm courtesy, handing her his boarding pass. Diane scrutinized it carefully, as if searching for an excuse to move him elsewhere. Another nearby passenger peered over, sensing an uncomfortable exchange brewing. Diane accused him under her breath of suspicious behavior, but it was loud enough for him to hear. Shock rippled through him, but he maintained composure. The fellow passenger was about to intervene when Diane finally handed the pass back with an abrupt, "Just stay in your seat." A knot of disquiet formed in Yassir's chest. He never imagined that a simple flight could become so fraught with tension. The aircraft door closed with a resounding click, and the jet bridge receded like a drawbridge pulling away from a fortress. Safety instructions began as flight attendants methodically demonstrated oxygen masks and life vests. Diane's movements were stiff, her eyes flicking toward Yassir with an undercurrent of hostility. A few rows back, an older man named Bill, retired from the U.S. Army, watched the entire exchange intently. Bill had seen enough discrimination in his lifetime to recognize it instantly. At the same time, a teenage girl across the aisle secretly turned on her phone camera, sensing something was amiss. Their quiet vigilance would soon prove critical. As the plane taxied to the runway, passengers settled in, pulling down window shades to block the bright sun. The engines roared, accelerating into takeoff. Yassir gazed out the window, momentarily distracted by the mesmerizing cityscape shrinking beneath the plane's ascent. Yet, Diane's unsettling demeanor lingered in his mind. He recalled stories from friends who had experienced similar prejudice in airports and on airplanes. It was exhausting that, even in the modern world, such biases persisted. This flight, though, would be different. He just didn't know how drastically. High above the clouds, the seeds of confrontation were already taking root. The seatbelt sign dinged off, signaling it was safe to move about the cabin. Diane pushed a beverage cart down the aisle, distributing soft drinks, pretzels, and peanuts. Yassir politely asked for a glass of water. She brought it, but deliberately set it down so forcefully that some spilled onto his tray table. He offered a nod of thanks, wiping up the spilled water with a napkin. Others nearby caught the disrespectful gesture, exchanging nervous glances. Yet, no one said anything outright. The tension was palpable, like electricity crackling in the stale cabin air. Yassir steeled himself, determined not to stoop to open conflict. When the in-flight meal service began, passengers looked forward to a hot lunch. Options included a chicken pasta dish or a vegetarian lasagna, each plated in tidy foil containers. Yassir politely requested the vegetarian option, as he preferred no meat. Diane's lip curled in a sneer, and she accused him of being particular. The remark hung ominously in the silence. Yassir felt a flush of discomfort. A mild-mannered passenger who had rarely faced open hostility, he struggled to find words. Another flight attendant, looking mortified, tried to intervene but was quickly waved off by Diane, whose stance radiated an air of bizarre ownership over the cabin. Seated a few rows behind, Bill the retired soldier quietly alerted his wife that something felt off. His senses were honed from years of service. He knew tension when he saw it, and this situation was escalating. Meanwhile, the teenage girl with her phone had captured key moments: Diane's sneer, the forced water spill, the snide remarks. She texted her father, who was traveling 2 rows ahead, letting him know she was filming because she sensed an injustice. The father gave her a discreet nod, signaling that she should keep the footage safe. Little did they realize how valuable that footage would become. Midway through the flight, Yassir decided to stretch his legs and headed to the restroom. As he stood, Diane nearly blocked his path with the beverage cart, pausing just long enough to make him feel unwelcome. Heart pounding slightly, he navigated around her. The restroom area was vacant, and he locked himself inside, taking a moment to breathe deeply. He reminded himself of the conference he was attending. He was, after all, a respected judge specializing in cases of civil liberties. The irony wasn't lost on him. He considered speaking up, but timing was everything, and he worried that an accusation might worsen the confrontation. Upon exiting, Yassir found Diane waiting in the galley. She glared, folding her arms as though guarding territory. In a low voice, she demanded to know why he was lurking near the front cabin. Yassir blinked, astonished by her audacity. He calmly explained he was simply using the restroom. Diane responded with a clipped, "We're watching you." That phrase echoed ominously in his mind. Her words carried weight, insinuating unwarranted suspicion. One might expect such hostility decades ago, but seeing it in modern times felt surreal. Yassir returned to his seat, heart heavy and resolve hardening. He wasn't certain yet how to handle the situation, but he knew he couldn't ignore it. The cabin lights dimmed for the in-flight movie, providing a semblance of calm. Some passengers tried to distract themselves with the film or a quick nap. Yassir, too unsettled to rest, thought about how to address this growing conflict. He glanced around, noticing the concern etched on the faces of nearby travelers who had witnessed the tension. They were not oblivious. Suddenly, a jolt of turbulence rattled the plane, evoking collective gasps. As if summoned by that momentary scare, Diane stormed through the aisle, barking at passengers to return to their seats and fasten their belts. Her eyes lingered on Yassir's row longer than on anyone else's. Then came an unexpected twist. The pilot's voice crackled over the intercom, announcing a medical emergency in the front row. A passenger had fainted, their complexion pale. Diane rushed forward, reflexively slipping into professional mode. She called for any doctors on board. Yassir, alarmed and concerned, stayed back but monitored from his seat. A young nurse came forward, assisting the unconscious passenger. Diane's hostility momentarily vanished as she rummaged for an oxygen mask and first aid kit. In that fleeting crisis, her prejudice took a back seat. Yet, the tension between her and Yassir still simmered, a dark undercurrent threatening to resurface once calm was restored. With the fainted passenger stabilizing, the pilot indicated they would continue to their destination. The relief in the cabin was palpable. People exhaled, thankful for the reprieve. But normalcy was short-lived. Diane locked eyes with Yassir once more, her earlier hostility returning tenfold. She looked almost disappointed that the crisis had not, in some twisted way, implicated him. He sensed it like a physical chill. Across the aisle, the teenage girl's phone was discreetly tilted, capturing every telling expression on Diane's face. In the hush following the medical scare, a new tension rose like the eye of a storm passing overhead, promising more turbulence yet to come. During a second round of beverage service, Diane reached Yassir's row and feigned a sugary smile. She offered drinks to his seatmate first. When it was his turn, her hand trembled slightly, revealing the pent-up resentment beneath her forced politeness. Yassir accepted an orange juice, determined to remain courteous. Suddenly she claimed the credit card he handed over for a small snack wouldn't go through. Confused, Yassir took the card back. Before he could object, she swiftly moved on. Moments later, his seatmate paid with the same card brand for a snack without issue. The contradiction didn't go unnoticed by those around them. 2 rows behind, a watchful man in a crisp business suit observed everything. He was an attorney, specializing in workplace discrimination cases. While he remained outwardly calm, his mind whirred with possible legal implications. He took mental notes, knowing how critical first-hand accounts can be in such disputes. Meanwhile, Bill grew more restless, fists clenching as he wrestled with the decision to stand up for Yassir. He recalled how prejudice had once nearly cost him a promotion in the army. Yet he also knew that confronting an airline employee in mid-flight could escalate dangerously. The atmosphere felt charged, as if a match hovered near an open fuel canister. A surprise announcement from the cockpit jolted everyone's attention. The pilot intended to alter the flight path due to severe weather conditions. Instead of flying directly to Los Angeles, they would reroute over a slightly southern path to avoid a violent storm system. The flight would be longer, perhaps by an hour. Passengers groaned or sighed, anxious about missed connections. It was a minor inconvenience for most, but for Yassir and Diane, trapped in this hostile dance, that extra hour might become an eternity. The plane adjusted course, banking gently. Outside, clouds thickened, forming ominous clusters that mirrored the tension inside the cabin. As if on cue, the turbulence intensified. The seatbelt sign blinked on again, accompanied by the pilot's stern reminder for everyone to remain seated. Diane took her place at the front, microphone in hand, repeating the announcement with urgency. When she caught sight of Yassir leaning forward to adjust his carry-on under the seat, her voice cracked, warning him sharply to remain still. Murmurs travelled among the passengers, for her overreaction was obvious. A sudden lurch of the plane caused a collective gasp. Seatbelts strained against passengers' chests. It felt as though nature itself was reflecting the turmoil within the aircraft. In the middle of the bumpiness, a fearful cry rang out from a child in economy class. The child was terrified, sobbing uncontrollably. Without hesitation, Yassir unbuckled momentarily. He had an extra blanket in his bag that he thought might soothe the child. But Diane instantly yelled at him, "Sit down right now!" Her tone was laced with unwarranted aggression. Other passengers froze, stunned by her hostility. Yassir raised his hands in surrender and returned to his seat. The father of the crying child glared at Diane, but he didn't want to risk further upsetting his child by arguing. Tension was now boiling beneath the surface. At last, the turbulence subsided, and the flight attendants resumed limited movement. Still, the hostility lingered like a bad odor. Diane periodically threw glances at Yassir's row, as though expecting him to cause trouble. Yassir, on his part, tried to keep to himself. He mentally replayed the confrontation, wondering how he might handle it once the plane landed. He was, after all, a judge with extensive knowledge of civil rights. A quiet resolve began to form a decision that he would not let this slide, but for now he remained composed. The teenage girl discreetly recorded, capturing a hidden narrative that would soon ignite a firestorm of consequences. Unexpectedly, the overhead speaker chimed, announcing free Wi-Fi due to the extended flight delay. Passengers cheered softly. Many turned to their devices, scrolling through emails and news feeds. Yassir checked his messages, focusing on official updates for the conference. Meanwhile, the teenage girl quietly transferred the recorded clips to a secure cloud account. She had overheard Diane's harsh language, including words that hinted at racism. People around them might have missed it, but the camera never lies. She typed a quick note. "I've been recording the flight attendant being really unfair to a passenger. We might need this later." She pressed send, her heart pounding. Suddenly, a sharp beep resounded, signaling a call light from the back of the plane. Diane marched down the aisle to address it. A passenger wanted a blanket. She responded with cold indifference, but halfway through handing it over, she spotted Yassir quietly speaking with the woman seated beside him. She craned her neck, as if seeking any sign of suspicious activity. The passenger requesting the blanket noticed her inattention and voiced frustration. Diane snapped at them. A hush of shock fell over the cabin. The pattern was becoming undeniably clear. Diane was fixated on harassing Yassir, prioritizing her distrust over normal duties. There was a momentary lull as the flight progressed over miles of open sky. Passengers sipped beverages and scrolled their screens, trying to ignore the swirling tension. Yassir, still calm, retreated into reading legal documents on his tablet. Bill leaned over the aisle, quietly asking if everything was okay. Yassir offered a polite smile, nodding that he'd manage. Bill, unconvinced, patted him on the shoulder. Unbeknownst to either of them, Diane watched, her expression cold. She seemed both infuriated and threatened by the support Yassir was receiving from other passengers. A confrontation was inevitable, and the entire cabin could sense the tension about to break. In a startling turn, Diane approached Yassir with a forced smile, brandishing a clipboard. She claimed there was a random seat check required, insisting on verifying his ticket details once more. This time, her voice carried an accusatory edge, insinuating that his seat assignment was fraudulent. Yassir responded calmly, repeating that he was in the correct seat. The entire row fell silent, their eyes ping-ponging between Diane and Yassir. Bill stood up from a couple rows behind, stepping into the aisle. "Stop harassing him," he said in a firm, resonant voice. Several heads turned, and for a moment, time stood still in that pressurized cabin. Diane's face hardened at Bill's intervention. "Sir, sit down," she hissed. Bill refused, crossing his arms. "You're the one causing trouble," he retorted. Diane repeated her command with growing anger, threatening to have him removed from the flight upon landing. A wave of anxiety washed over the passengers. The prospect of an emergency diversion for a conflict was terrifying. The pilot's voice chimed overhead, sternly requesting calm. Moments later, the co-pilot himself stepped out of the cockpit, drawn by the commotion. He took in the scene, Diane's flushed face, Bill's protective stance, and Yassir's calm confusion. The air crackled with mounting tension, verging on chaos. The co-pilot, named Marcus Green, attempted to de-escalate the situation. "Let's all take a deep breath," he urged gently, addressing Diane and Bill. But Diane doubled down, declaring Yassir was behaving suspiciously. The entire cabin erupted in shocked whispers. Yassir, refusing to be cowed, finally spoke up. "I've done nothing wrong." He recounted the bizarre harassment he'd endured. Bill chimed in with corroborating details. A woman in the next row testified she'd seen Diane single him out. Diane scoffed, dismissing them. But then, the teenage girl raised her hand, phone in hand. "I have videos," she said quietly. The revelation sent a jolt through every passenger present. All eyes flicked to the phone. Diane's composure faltered for the first time. A hush blanketed the cabin, broken only by the hum of the engines. The teenage girl calmly explained she had footage of Diane's repeated harassment. She offered to show it to the co-pilot. Concern etched across Marcus Green's face as he realized the situation was more serious than he'd initially thought. Diane stepped back, searching for a way out. She sputtered something about following protocol, but her words rang hollow. Yassir remained silent, his expression measured. He hadn't yet revealed his true occupation or the extent of his influence. The co-pilot took the phone, stepping forward to watch the clips. Some passengers craned their necks, hoping for a glimpse. The cabin was eerily still, everyone waiting. Diane hovered like a cornered animal. As the co-pilot watched, the teenage girl's phone revealed Diane's sneers, her rude comments, and her telling the young man to stay in your seat in a clearly hostile tone. There was even a snippet of her calling him suspicious. An audible exhale emerged from Marcus. He handed the phone back, turning to Diane with disappointment etched across his features. "We need to speak in the galley," he said, voice low but firm. Reluctantly, Diane followed him to the forward galley. The curtain swished closed, and hushed voices spilled out. Many passengers exchanged glances, relieved that someone in authority was finally investigating. Yassir leaned back in his seat, exhaling a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Bill gave him a reassuring nod. The teenage girl's father squeezed her shoulder in approval. Moments later, the co-pilot returned, face grim. He apologized to the cabin for the disturbance, assuring everyone that the situation was under review. Diane didn't reappear immediately, but no one could relax yet. They sensed there were chapters left in this unfolding drama. After a span of 10 tense minutes, Diane emerged, expression stormy. She locked eyes with Yassir, but said nothing. The co-pilot escorted her to a jump seat near the rear, effectively removing her from regular duties for the remainder of the flight. Another flight attendant, a soft-spoken man named Reggie, stepped up to assume Diane's responsibilities. Reggie apologized to passengers, offering a gentle smile. A collective sigh seemed to wash through the cabin. Could the nightmare be over? Yet, in Yassir's mind, questions swirled. Would there be accountability once they landed? Could Diane simply walk away from her offensive behavior? Clouds parted outside as the aircraft soared closer to the coastline. The pilot announced they had successfully navigated around the storm. Land was in sight, and they'd be touching down in Los Angeles with only a minor delay. Relief mingled with lingering uncertainty. Yassir gazed out the window at the sprawling cityscape. He recalled countless times he had delivered verdicts against discrimination in his courtroom. He wondered if fate had placed him here to witness such bias firsthand. An unexpected sense of purpose filled him, though the tension in his chest hadn't fully dissipated. Karmic retribution, he thought. Sometimes it arrives on swift wings. With the plane beginning its descent, the seatbelt sign was illuminated again. Yassir kept silent, remembering that Diane was still at the rear. Passengers whispered among themselves, eager to see the final outcome. Had it all blown over, or was there more to come? Meanwhile, Bill struck up a conversation with Yassir, revealing his own experiences with discrimination. Yassir listened attentively, sharing only that he worked in the legal field. Bill pressed for more details, but Yassir offered a gentle smile. "I'll handle this properly once we're on the ground," he stated. Bill nodded, comforted by Yassir's quiet confidence. Right before the wheels touched down, an unexpected announcement came over the PAR system. Medical personnel and airport security will meet the aircraft upon arrival. Alarm rippled through the cabin. People suspected it was related to the earlier medical emergency, but a creeping suspicion told them it could also involve the flight attendant's misconduct. The teenage girl's father quickly reminded her to keep the footage backed up. Bill exchanged a knowing look with Yassir. Although the plane landed smoothly, no one felt at ease. It was as if the seatbelts tethered them to an unresolved drama about to spill onto the airport tarmac. The landing gear screeched as the Boeing 777 touched the runway. Passengers applauded out of habit, though the mood remained tense. Slowly, the plane taxied to the gate. Outside, Yassir glimpsed blinking lights of airport vehicles. Indeed, a paramedic team was waiting, but behind them stood two uniformed airport security officers scanning the windows. The door opened, and the paramedics entered first, heading toward the front to check on the previously fainted passenger. Soon after, the security officers stepped in. Their presence loomed at the doorway, setting the stage for the final confrontation. Everyone seemed to hold their breath as the cabin lights brightened. Reggie directed the officers toward the rear, where Diane was seated. Nervously, she stood, adjusting her uniform. She attempted to maintain an air of authority, but there was a tremor in her posture. Passengers craned to watch as she was escorted off first, exchanging words with the security team that no one else could hear. At the front of the plane, the pilot approached Yassir. With a sincere expression, he apologized for the ordeal. Yassir offered a respectful nod, grateful for the pilot's acknowledgement. Meanwhile, Bill and the teenage girl stood nearby, ready to back him up with testimony and video evidence. Following standard protocol, passengers disembarked row by row. When Yassir reached the jet bridge, an airline representative stood waiting alongside a senior airport official. "Sir, if you have a moment," the representative said. Yassir nodded. Bill lingered behind him, as did the teenage girl and her father, determined not to let him face this alone. On the tarmac below, Diane was being questioned, her face flushed. She gesticulated wildly, presumably to defend her actions. Yassir felt a wave of sympathy for her ignorance, despite her hostility. But justice was his forte, and he would see this through properly. He walked forward, heart steady. They guided Yassir into a quiet waiting area near the gate. The teenage girl handed the phone over to her father, who showed the footage to the airline representative and the airport official. The shock on their faces was immediate. They glanced from the screen to Yassir, apologizing profusely. The representative stammered that Diane's behavior was completely unacceptable. Bill added his first-hand account, describing how she singled Yassir out. Yassir stood tall, clarifying that he had been nothing but compliant and polite. The officials nodded gravely, acknowledging they would take appropriate measures. But the storyline was far from over. Sensing the weight of the moment, Yassir finally introduced himself fully. "My name is Yassir Azizi, and I'm a district court judge specializing in civil liberties and anti-discrimination cases." His words reverberated in the small waiting area. The airline representative visibly paled, realizing the enormity of the situation. Gasps resonated from a few staff members who had gathered. Bill allowed himself a small grin, while the teenage girl and her father exchanged satisfied glances. Yassir explained that he'd seen countless such cases from behind the bench, but never expected to be a victim in mid-air. A hush blanketed the group, the significance of his position sinking in. The airline representative scrambled, promising a thorough investigation and immediate disciplinary action against Diane. Yassir calmly requested that any potential resolution go beyond mere punishment. He wanted to see real training and systemic changes that would prevent this from happening again. The representative hesitated, but assured him they would consult with the airline's legal department. Bill, stepping up, added that he would testify if needed. The teenage girl proudly offered her footage. The father gave Yassir his business card, stating he'd be willing to collaborate on any follow-up. In that moment, alliances formed among the small group, united in their pursuit of justice. Outside the terminal windows, the sun was dipping below the horizon, bathing the tarmac in a warm, golden glow. Despite the tension, the beauty of the sunset struck Yassir. It felt like a symbolic end to a dark chapter, hinting at a new beginning. Officials informed him that Diane would be taken off duty pending a formal hearing. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of an airline manager who apologized profusely. They offered to arrange for Yassir's onward transportation and hotel accommodations. He declined any special treatment for the night, but the manager insisted. He finally agreed, but only after they also agreed to address the root causes of such discrimination. As they spoke, Diane was led past the waiting area, escorted by security. Her eyes flicked to Yassir, wide with a mix of anger and panic. She opened her mouth as if to speak, but the officers ushered her forward. That fleeting moment felt charged. Two individuals who had clashed in midair, now standing in the aftermath of the storm. Yassir experienced a pang of compassion. Hatred, after all, is often born of ignorance. But consequences were necessary. The airline manager apologized again, reminding Yassir that he was free to press charges if he wished. Yassir gave a non-committal nod, not ready to decide on the spot. Finally released from the official protocols, Yassir, Bill, and the teenage girl's family stepped out into the bustling airport corridor. Rushing travelers, overhead announcements, and bright neon signs created a surreal backdrop. It was hard to believe that, mere hours ago, they had been trapped in a pressurized cabin, contending with a flight attendant's hatred. Bill shook Yassir's hand firmly, expressing admiration for his composure. The teenage girl timidly asked if she might keep in touch, hoping her video could help. Yasir thanked her. Taking note of her father's contact details, the group parted ways, each feeling they had witnessed something profound. Yasir walked to the baggage claim area, where he retrieved his luggage. As he waited, the memory of Diane's sneering remarks surfaced. He thought about the myriad ways unconscious bias infiltrates daily life. A wave of exhaustion hit him, but also a sense of resolve. He was scheduled to speak at a legal conference the following morning, ironically, on the very subject of civil rights. He resolved to incorporate this personal ordeal into his keynote. After all, real stories spark real change. He headed for the exit, mind buzzing with possibilities. Outside, a sleek black sedan, arranged by the airline, waited to take him to a nearby hotel. At the hotel, Yasir checked in under a swirl of emotions. The staff, informed by the airline, treated him with the utmost courtesy. He settled into his room, a spacious suite overlooking the city lights. Yet, rest was elusive. He paced, reliving the confrontation. The phone on the nightstand rang. It was the airline manager, once again apologizing and updating him on the steps being taken. Diane was officially suspended, pending a full investigation and possible termination. They asked if he would be willing to give an official statement. Yasir agreed, stating he'd do so after his conference, but he left no doubt that he intended to see this through. That night, Yasir drafted his conference speech, weaving in the fresh experience. He reflected on how prejudice appears in everyday scenarios, from airports to workplaces. He also thought about the people who stood up for him, the teenage girl, Bill, the co-pilot. Their solidarity counterbalanced Diane's hostility. It was a reminder that while hatred can rear its head anywhere, so too can empathy and courage. As the hours slipped away, his speech took shape, each word resonating with new conviction. He finally dozed off in the early hours, lulled by the city's gentle hum and a firm belief that justice would prevail. Morning arrived swiftly, bringing a bright, cloudless sky. Yasir donned a crisp suit and headed to the conference venue. It was located in a towering downtown building, its reflective surfaces gleaming under the California sun. He navigated through the bustling lobby, exchanging pleasantries with colleagues. Many recognized him from previous seminars, greeting him warmly. If only they knew the story simmering beneath his calm demeanor. He made his way to a private lounge area, where a staffer offered coffee and a printed schedule. Just then, his phone buzzed with a call from an unknown number. He answered hesitantly, bracing for unexpected news. To his surprise, the caller identified themselves as an investigative journalist who had gotten wind of an incident on a Delta flight involving alleged discrimination. Yasir's name had not been publicly released, but they had leads pointing to a Muslim passenger being harassed. The journalist politely inquired if he could confirm any details. Yasir paused, caution guiding his response. He politely declined to comment for now, stating that a formal investigation was underway. The journalist accepted this but hinted the story might break soon. Yasir ended the call with a sense of unease. He needed to ensure the truth was told accurately, yet also protect the integrity of the investigation. Minutes before taking the stage, Yasir composed himself, the auditorium filled with judges, lawyers, and civil rights activists. The introduction concluded, and applause signaled it was his turn to speak. Stepping up to the podium, he locked eyes with the audience. His voice, steady yet resonant, began with the universal principles of justice, fair treatment, respect, dignity. Then he shared a personal account, carefully omitting airline names and personal identifiers, describing how prejudice had confronted him at 30,000 feet. Gasps echoed in the hall. By the time he finished, the crowd was silent. A standing ovation erupted, thunderous and heartfelt. In that moment, Yasir realized his ordeal could become a catalyst for broader change. After the speech, Attendees swarmed him with questions. Some thanked him for shedding light on real-world discrimination, while others urged him to pursue legal action. He reassured them that measures were in motion. Among the crowd was a representative from a well-known civil rights organization who handed Yassir a card, offering support. The synergy was palpable. Momentum was building for a serious stand against discriminatory behavior in public services. Yassir felt a renewed vigor, his convictions sharpened by the knowledge that so many stood with him. In the midst of these well-wishers, another phone call arrived this time from the airline's legal counsel. The counsel spoke with measured courtesy, explaining that their internal review was progressing. They had also received the video footage from the teenage girl's father. The evidence was unequivocal, the attorney said. The airline wanted to know how Yassir might wish to proceed. Could they settle quietly? Or would he press for a formal complaint with the relevant aviation authority? Yassir insisted on a thorough, transparent process. He expressed that he wasn't primarily interested in monetary compensation. What he wanted was systemic change, mandatory diversity and sensitivity training, an overhaul of complaint procedures, and clear accountability measures. The airline's attorney agreed to escalate those requests. Leaving the conference venue, Yassir spotted the teenage girl and her father waiting near the entrance. They'd driven from the airport, eager to update him. The girl was beaming. "I emailed the airline the clips," she announced, brandishing her phone. They replied and said they've launched an investigation. Yassir thanked her sincerely, commending her courage. Meanwhile, the father expressed frustration at how even in modern times such blatant racism could occur. Yassir suggested that perhaps they could join him in advocating for better policies. The father agreed enthusiastically. Just as they stood there, a conference attendee recognized Yassir and walked over, hinting that the local press was eager for a statement. It took another 2 days for events to crystallize. By then, the story had leaked to a major media outlet, which published an article headlined "Passenger Claims Discrimination by Flight Attendant, Shocking Footage Surfaces." Although names were withheld, a swirling debate ignited online. Social media erupted, with many condemning the airline and demanding accountability. Diane's face, partially blurred, appeared in the video clips that circulated. Public outrage soared, fueling calls for her termination. The airline scrambled to control the narrative. Meanwhile, Yassir weighed the timing of revealing his identity. He wanted to ensure the focus remained on the broader issue rather than on personal notoriety. Late that afternoon, the airline issued a statement. "We do not tolerate discrimination in any form. The flight attendant in question has been suspended pending a complete review. We have reached out to the passenger to offer our sincerest apologies and are committed to making meaningful changes." The statement made waves, but many felt it was vague. Journalists hunted for more details. Yassir's phone buzzed non-stop as colleagues urged him to come forward publicly. Bill even called, saying he'd be happy to stand beside him during a press conference. The teenage girl's father left voicemails, volunteering their footage as public evidence. Yassir knew the next step was critical. At last, Yassir decided to grant a single televised interview to set the record straight. He did so on the condition that the focus remain on discriminatory behavior, not on sensational headlines. Standing before the camera, he introduced himself as a district court judge and calmly recounted his experience. He praised the passengers who intervened, the co-pilot's firm response, and the airline's ultimate acceptance of responsibility. He then underscored the broader lesson: prejudice can surface anywhere, even in a pressurized cabin where trust is paramount. By the end of the interview, social media was ablaze with support. Donations poured into civil rights organizations. Public sentiment coalesced around the call for mandated anti-bias training in airlines nationwide. In the aftermath, the airline arranged a formal meeting with Yassir their executive board, and a coalition of civil rights advocates. Over a long, tense session, they hammered out an agreement. The airline committed to launching mandatory diversity training for all crew members, establishing a zero-tolerance policy for racist or discriminatory language, and setting up a clearer reporting mechanism so that incidents like this could never be swept under the rug. Yasir listened carefully, ensuring each promise was backed by a tangible timetable. As the meeting ended, a sense of relief washed over him. Actual, systemic progress now seemed within reach. Meanwhile, Diane faced a disciplinary hearing, her once confident demeanor shattered. Details emerged about prior passenger complaints, previously dismissed as misunderstandings. This time, armed with undeniable video evidence, the case was ironclad. The airline terminated her employment. Some reports suggested she might face further legal repercussions for harassment, though that was still under review. Karmic retribution had arrived. The paradox of a flight attendant entrusted with the care of travelers harboring discriminatory views had led to her downfall. Yasir felt no personal glee in her termination. He believed in transformative justice. Still, he acknowledged that consequences were necessary, not just for closure, but as a deterrent to others. In a move that surprised many, Yasir reached out to Diane through an intermediary, offering a chance for dialogue. His aim was to see if she was willing to understand why her actions were harmful. The intermediary reported back that Diane was not interested, too engulfed in her own anger and fear. Yasir understood that not everyone was ready to confront their biases. Still, he had extended a hand. Her refusal confirmed the unfortunate reality: some people choose to remain chained to their prejudice. Yasir shifted his focus to constructive channels, using the momentum from the incident to drive broader reforms. Weeks passed, and the story slowly faded from mainstream headlines, replaced by newer crises and scandals. But the ripples endured. Delta's official training modules underwent a major revamp, incorporating scenario-based exercises to combat racial bias. Other airlines quietly adopted similar strategies, wary of being caught in a similar scandal. Civil rights organizations hailed Yasir's stance as a precedent-setting moment, showing that passenger mistreatment would no longer be tolerated. Bill stayed in touch, inviting Yasir to speak at a veterans gathering about unity and respect. The teenage girl and her father sent periodic updates, thrilled that their recording had sparked such a movement. At the next judicial conference, Yasir delivered an address on implicit bias within institutions, referencing not just courtrooms, but also everyday services like airlines. He emphasized how legal frameworks must ensure accountability at every level. His words resonated, prompting many judges to consider how discrimination might taint even the most routine interactions. He concluded by stressing that real justice extends beyond punitive measures. It seeks to transform hearts and systems alike. A standing ovation erupted, and Yasir left the stage with renewed purpose. His professional work had merged with a personal mission, one that soared far beyond the confines of a single flight. Late one evening, months after the incident, Yasir sat in his home study, reflecting on the surreal nature of it all. A seemingly ordinary plane trip had thrust him into a vortex of drama, prejudice, and unexpected alliances. He opened his inbox, finding emails from strangers sharing their own stories of discrimination in travel. They thanked him for his courage, for standing up against injustice. Some mentioned they were now filming such incidents for evidence, empowered by the example of that teenage girl. Yasir responded to each message patiently, reminding them that true power lies in collective action. A faint smile touched his lips as he realized how far one righteous stand could reach. Looking back, Yasir recognized that the seeds of hatred though deeply rooted, can be exposed and uprooted with persistent effort. The flight attendant's fate might have been grim, but her downfall served as a warning. Air travel is meant to bring people together across great distances, not foster division. As the final swirl of this story settled, Yasia saw that karmic justice had played its part. Diane's freezing expression when he revealed he was a judge would forever remain a testament to how assumptions can backfire. Yet, more than any personal victory, it was the collective rallying of passengers, the airline's ultimate reforms, and the broader societal dialogue that truly demonstrated the triumph of empathy over prejudice. Thank you for joining us on this dramatic, twist-filled voyage through the skies. This story reminds us that bigotry, when exposed, can be met with powerful solidarity and lasting change. By standing firm against discrimination, Yasia turned a harrowing moment into a catalyst for progress. We can all learn from the unity displayed by Bill, the teenage girl, and the co-pilot proof that any of us can be an ally in the face of injustice. If this tale resonated with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps bring vital stories of courage and transformation to light, inspiring us all to strive for a more just and inclusive world.